Whenever I think of Ultraman, one of the first things that comes to my mind is how Ultraman Tiga was brought back to his feet in his finale by the willpower of kids around the world. Because they really believed in him, and together they were able to defeat a Lovecraftian terror. And not only that, but years later in the Ultraman Dyna film, those same kids that helped Tiga that fateful day grew up and were able to help him once more alongside a new generation of kids to bring Tiga back to life to help Ultraman Dyna. Hello, welcome back to Tiger Drop Films. If you're a returning viewer, then thank you for coming back. And if you're new, then I hope you stick around. And today I have a video over Ultraman. Now, I'm no stranger to the Ultraman franchise when talking about it on this channel. I have an entire playlist full of Ultraman videos. But today, I want to dive into a little bit on what makes Ultraman so unique, the concept of the character, his purpose, and what really makes him stand out among other characters, and his legacy. Ultraman is a character embedded with optimism, hope, and promise for the future. The Ultraman franchise is ultimately a timeless story, one that can be reimagined year after year, because what is unique about the Ultraman character and the concept behind him is that we've had so many new versions of the character over the span of almost 6 decades. Additionally, what's really unique is that there's not one single secret identity behind Ultraman. And what I mean is that if you compare him to, say, Western heroes from Marvel or DC, where there's usually just one iconic character behind a mantle, like Peter Parker or Bruce Wayne, when it comes to Ultraman, it's almost always a new character that inhabits the name Ultraman. And I find that fascinating and refreshing because when you go from Ultraman Show to Ultraman Show, it's always the same general concept of some sort of human character that's either his own identity or he's created by Ultraman. There's different ways you can have the concept of the human host. But what's so unique is that when you go from show to show, it just feels fresh for such a simple concept. I cannot tell you one Ultraman that is exactly the same as another. They're all so unique and varied. Even this year's Shin Ultraman really distanced himself from the original with his own unique twist. And what I mean is that for such a simple concept, there's so much imagination that you can draw from it. And imagination is the key here. Ultraman is part of Tsuburaya Productions, and he was invented by E.G. Tsuburaya himself back in 1966. And the cool thing is that E.G. Tsuburaya also helped create Godzilla. Yes, the big G himself. And I like to think of Godzilla and Ultraman as brother franchises in a sense. They're both tokusatsu icons that pioneered their own paths in their own respective rights. With the Godzilla, so many new kaiju were created, and so many famous Japanese films. And with Ultraman, he spawned the idea of a tokusatsu superhero. As after Ultraman, we get the likes of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, each of which have created their own very interesting franchises that have equally evolved over the years. But when it comes to what makes Ultraman so distinct all these years later with all these other franchises, I like to think of it this way. So the Ultraman franchise is all about positivity and good human nature and a promise for the future and what tomorrow may bring for everyone. And what I find so fascinating is that when you look at E.G. Tsuburaya's career, right? I remember reading that one of his biggest inspirations growing up was seeing the original King Kong. E.G. Tsuburaya was so mesmerized, so fascinated by King Kong and the special effects and the story. And from the moment Tsuburaya saw that film, he was inspired. And years later, he'd get into the Japanese film industry. And then I'm sure you know the story of the original Godzilla and how you can truly see how King Kong inspired E.G. Tsuburaya in developing the effects, where he eventually created tokusatsu, the iconic man in a suit, suitmation. And whenever people in the press just call it men in rubber suits, I always roll my eyes because it's not just men in rubber suits, it's much more than that. It's a genuine combination of special effects, fantasy, and real-life imagery, and that's what makes tokusatsu so gripping to me. And as someone who grew up with Godzilla and King Kong, it was so cool to get into Ultraman a couple years ago around 2019. Because it was truly like discovering another part of Eiji Tsuburaya, his other franchise, his other creation. And Eiji Tsuburaya would go on to create other iconic creatures such as Rodan, Anguirus, bringing Mothra to life from her novel. And what's really cool is that he got to bring his inspiration to life, King Kong himself, and have him fight Godzilla. I mean, that was just fate doing its best work, you know what I mean? It's just so awesome that Tsuburaya got to have his own creation fight his inspiration. It's so cool. And of course, Tsuburaya would make many other tokusatsu features for Toho, and eventually creating his own company, Tsuburaya Productions, in the mid-60s. And the first show they created was a tokusatsu one, bringing tokusatsu to television, which was unheard of at that time, besides obviously reruns of films. And this tokusatsu show designed for television was called Ultra Q. And it's a brilliant show, filmed in monochrome, and it brought team investigating mystery and sci-fi horror for viewers everywhere in Japan, because by this point more people in households were having televisions. And the beauty is that Eiji Tsuburaya created so many unique kaiju and aliens and other creatures for the show. And this brings us to Ultraman in 1966. What I find so fascinating and beautiful is that Tsuburaya had created all these monsters. And he knew that he had to create something for kids to be inspired by, someone to light the way in the darkness, a character, a hero that can stand up against all these monsters and aliens that represent our fear of the unknown, that uncertainty of the future. Or in other words, for all the destruction that Godzilla represents, there's also an Ultraman that represents the good of humanity, a reason to live, and not just dwell on our mistakes that have caused these monsters. Ultraman is a way for us to improve. As we see in the original show, there's a theme of Ultraman leading humanity to fight our own battles and fix our own mistakes. And just to be better. To be strong enough to help others. Because the concept of Ultraman is not just a hero who swoops in and fights all of our battles for us. He's the one who's supposed to improve humanity. Because he is no god. Instead, he's just a man trying to help his friends and people he doesn't even know, as in inspiring others that just see him in his actions when he's fighting these creatures, these horrible monsters. And while there definitely is some religious connotation given to the concept of Ultraman, such as his specium ray looking like a cross, and some of the imagery throughout the decades of the series, I do believe that Ultraman is very consistently portrayed as just the embodiment of the human spirit, something that can speak to all cultures, that idea and famous folk tales of a hero that rises up to help the people. But Ultraman is also a franchise that has never forgotten the basics of a superhero, as in that it's kids that truly look up to these guys. And I think it's very important for a superhero franchise to remember the important aspect that at the end of the day, superheroes appeal to our childlike wonder. Because one thing I noticed throughout many different Ultraman shows is that you'll see adult characters have the same fascination and awe-inspiring wonder that a lot of kids have. And I even noticed this with myself, because I really got into Ultraman with my youngest brother. And over the years, we've watched different Ultraman shows together. And it's just so fun having this franchise to connect to him with. And being able to see how Ultraman is reflected in a child's eyes, as well as my own adult eyes, it's just been very eye-opening and uplifting. Because for all the problems that the world has, the fact that the Ultraman franchise has consistently showed that humanity can be better And for all of our flaws, there is still no reason not to love. If there's one Ultraman song that I think really encapsulates this description, it would have to be the song called Ultraman Love for Children. And Ultrafan here, his channel has a really good tribute video with that song. You should check it out. But I think that song really does a great job showing what Ultraman's really about. So the many different Ultraman are truly timeless characters, with their own unique battles and foes and uplifting stories, along with somber stories as well, because life is really bittersweet. And one thing I find truly beautiful about this fanbase is that everybody has their own favorite Ultraman. And I usually see no arguments between which is better among fans, instead just people sharing which Ultraman they love and just appreciating our favorite Ultraman heroes. And I think that's really heartwarming. When you look at the current Super Rad productions today, I'm just so inspired by what they're doing with the character, with so many different versions existing at once and even crossing over. And when it comes to their stage plays and their programs, they even have an Ultraman Foundation. It just fills my heart with genuine joy. And I would love to work with this company someday and just help them in some way or be a part of the Ultraman team, the family, the community. And I have to mention that I adore that Super Rad Productions is keeping the concept of imagination as a core part of the Ultraman identity. Like when you watch episodes of Ultraman Blazer and you get the ads that are already in the show for Superia, they have their imagination program they're doing, and it's just about creativity and inspiration. And I think that really is what E.G. Subra himself would have wanted, because he was the guy whose imagination was blown away and uplifted by King Kong. And I think that really shows that special effects from monsters to heroes can really capture people, and it's something that can really transcend all barriers and bring people together for just the appreciation of entertainment, storytelling, and all around just cool visuals. And while E.G. Subarai himself was only around for the first 3 Ultra shows, including Ultra Q, it's really beautiful how his family has carried on this franchise, this beloved piece of art. And you can see his ideals of creativity and imagination and pure sincerity being true in all the new creators that have been brought into his franchise. Like if you look at all the new modern shows, a lot of them have the same development team that switches on and off, but it's so cool that these group of creatives are able to come on and create so many new versions of Ultraman. And I just find that so inspiring. Because in our world where there's a lot of discussion around content and the current state of media and how there seems to be a sort of drought in sincerity, I was so drawn to the Ultraman franchise for what it presented. Just these stories of people surviving great calamities. And I believe it takes a great amount of true creativity to sort of retell very similar stories year after year in a very fresh way. Like the way that Ultraman Tiga inspires us is very similar to how Ultraman Nexus inspires us, but they do it in such different ways with the same concept. It's so cool. So in conclusion, I think the purpose of Ultraman is imagination, belief in the human spirit and why it's important to protect it, and inspiring the younger generations to follow their dreams. That's just a way of summing it up, but it's common themes I've noticed throughout the franchise. And no matter what, Ultraman is a celebration of all things childlike wonder. Because no matter how much older we get and as the world becomes more cynical, it's important to remember what inspired us all those years ago. You might just find that smile you've been looking for. I've been Tiger Drop Films, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Comment below your favorite versions of Ultraman and your memories of the franchise, and share my video if you can. Thanks again for watching, and please stay tuned. creating a new legacy can be really amazing and, dare I say, kick-ass when done right. And I'm happy to say that the Ultraman series has done just that, making a legacy that is worthy, beautiful, has a meaning, and kicks ass all at the same time. Today at Tiger Drop Films, I'm jumping back to the Ultraman series because I just love coming back to it and it always grabs me by my heart. And I want to talk about a certain Ultraman who's celebrating a pretty big milestone, that being his 15th anniversary. I may be a little bit late on it, but I want to talk about it. You see, Ultraman Zero was the start of what I call Legacy Ultras. He really started this trend of having a new Ultraman be inspired and continuing the story, in a way, of a past legacy and legendary Ultraman. But you see, Zero was really unique because he really became the flagship boy of the franchise around the early or mid-2000s when he first fought Ultraman Belial. After Belial tried to take out all of the Land of Light and cause a bunch of ruckus in the monster graveyard. There's a lot that goes into the lore, but I'll keep it brief. This isn't really a history video, instead just a nice look back on Ultraman Zero and the other Ultramans that followed in his footsteps. So, join me today, sit back, grab your plasma spark, and let's get into it. It usually takes just one guy to start a trend. And for the Ultraman series, that would be none other than Ultraman Zero, the son of Ultra 7, and star pupil of Ultraman Leo. Two Showa dudes have a bond that go way back themselves, making it fitting for Zero to have qualities of both. And wouldn't you know it, Ultraman Zero still has his presence felt throughout the series today. I'll be blunt up front and tell ya he's the mentor of my personal favorite Ultra, that being Ultraman Z. Years ago, when I started this channel, I had a heavier focus on tokusatsu with my Ultraman Z video in 2022. I've come a long way with my commentary style since then, but I think it's prime time to give Zero his due. Ultraman Zero has carved out a legacy of his own that has transcended his original appearance against Belial. From a disgraced warrior who had to overcome a great evil in the form of Belial several times, to now being a master himself, Zero is a legend unlike any other. He even has his own cape. And not only that, he's also carved out the opportunity for other brand new Ultramen to create their own legacy. Just look at Ultraman Z himself. He has several forms that embrace all eras of Ultraman, sometimes even combining a few of them. Look at his Alpha Edge form. He's got Ultraman Zero, Ultra 7, and Ultraman Leo all together, and their Z coins that help create the Alpha Edge form. A true martial arts experience, but I love that that form alone highlights how their bond transcends and goes back in time with those three particular Ultramen. It's so cool, I love it. And a lot of Ultraman Z's other forms do the same thing, such as Tiga, Dyna, and Gaia, and many others. And if you just look at the way that the new generation has really forged its own identity, I can really see why it succeeded compared to past attempts to replicate already existing Ultraman. If you look at, now I'm going to put this just layman terms, but in the early 90s when SUPERO was trying to expand Ultraman worldwide, and even at their own homeland, you can really see how just trying to redo the first original Ultraman doesn't always work out, even if you give him some new tweaks to his design. And of course these are their own individual Ultraman, no doubt about that, but you can still see they're clearly still trying to be a sort of a big homage to the first Ultraman. Whether that be Ultraman Great, Ultraman Powered, or even Ultraman Neos, with Ultra 721, it's clear that they're just trying to make their own kind of update to an already existing and well-established and beloved version of a character. However, that wasn't enough, because it was the era of Ultraman Tiga, then Dyna, and Gaia, and Cosmos, and Nexus, and all of them that really helped highlight why Ultraman has to be versatile and adapt past the red and silver color scheme into their own beings. And that's why the early 90s part of the Heisei era and the early 2000s really showed how much Ultraman can adapt, even with outside forces kind of making the franchise change by the time where we got to Max and Mebius. But with all that in mind, I do think that Mebius in particular was really interesting because he was, in a way, a Legacy Ultra himself, being emblematic of the whole Showa era, and honoring the original Showa brothers, and even others like Leo and 80. It's so cool. So you should definitely take into consideration that Moebius, in a way, was a big culmination of the Ultraman franchise for its 30th anniversary. I mean, of course he was, but the way that he's able to incorporate and highlight how meaningful the Showa Ultraman era was for so many fans was delightful. And of course, a few years after Moebius, just shortly would get Ultraman Zero. And throughout the years, Ultraman Zero has gone off and made his own legacy. But what I really want to highlight of Zero, and it's a part of him that really hasn't popped up in many years, but at least when you're starting out, he had other legacy tokusatsu heroes from Tsuburaya that he teamed up with, such as Mirror Man living on with Mirror Knight, Fireman with Glenfire, Jumborg Ace, and Gene Bot. And I even throw in that I think Gene Bot has a little bit of Gridman in there. And then you have the younger brother, so to speak, the Gene Bot with Gene 9, who is also based off of Robot from Jumborg Ace, that being Jumborg 9. So all these guys form Ultimate Force Zero, and is pretty much a big homage to all these classic tokusatsu heroes, not just Ultraman, but other tokusatsu heroes that were already inspired by Ultraman in the first place throughout the late 60s and the early 70s, and I think that's just beautiful. It's so cool that the son of Ultra 7 was able to create his own team of legacy heroes. And that's not all. This was just the first stepping stone. It would further extend throughout the main Ultraman shows, where we got guys like Ultraman Taiga, the direct son of Ultraman Taro. And while I still need to check out the Taiga show, I've heard really good things about it. And from the clips I've seen, it has a really nice bit of a Showa feel in some parts. And while there was a pretty big gap between where we got Ultraman Zero to Ultraman Taiga, it's still cool that they went back to the idea of a Showa brother having a son. And while, yeah, I don't think we ever find out who the mothers are for either Zero or Taiga, it's still cool that these Ultramen have their own sons that can carry on the legacy while still looking and behaving like their own characters. And whenever the sons have to fight the foes that their fathers fought, it's just icing on the cake. Now, I've talked about a few of the direct connections that these legacy Ultras have to their forefathers. And yeah, during the new generation, there was a bunch of upgrades and power-ups that would create a new form, these forms for a lot of the new generation Ultras, but I don't think those quite count. However, I do think that I should mention Ultraman Jeed, since he is the son of the big bad daddy Ultraman Belial. And I do truly believe that Jeed was able to create his own identity separate from Belial, even though I don't really think we've seen him in a hot minute, besides maybe the recap shows that happen around the early times every year. But I think my favorite Jeed form was the one that has mixed with Father of Ultra, or the one he had in Ultraman Z. Both of those are my favorite Jeed designs. But regardless, he was still able to create his own identity, and his bond of Zero and Z in particular is really nice to see evolve. Now, I also want to bring up one that is a bit more under the radar, but I love seeing him, that being Ultraman Regulos, and in many ways the new gen version of Ultraman Leo. But the funny thing is, they don't quite have a father and son dynamic, and not really much of a mentor dynamic, although they did train together before the events of Ultraman Leo's show. I would say they have more of a brotherly bond. I know that's saying something since Leo already has Astra, but they definitely have a more of a bro dynamic, which is even more interesting since due to some time displacement and time dilation, Ultraman Regulos is technically supposed to be the same age as Ultraman Leo and Astra, but because of being displaced in time when the whole alien magma army attacked, Ultraman Regulos hasn't aged at all, also due to being held in captivity by the Absolutians. And by the way, when are we going to see the Absolutians return, huh? It's been a couple years since the last big event. But regardless, that's kind of cool that technically Ultraman Regulos was born in the same era as the Showa brothers, and of course he's able to do his own thing with the time displacement, and create his own way of fighting with his own particular mastery of the Cosmo Beast style. I've made a video on the channel before where I did a normal review of Ultraman Regulus, so you can check that video out. It's a bit of an older one of mine. I don't know what the fancy mic I have right here. But I really enjoyed Ultraman Regulus. It was a short and sweet series, and I am going to go back and rewatch it. But I really enjoyed it. It was cool seeing some more love given to Ultraman Leo. And, of course, Leo had Zero to help carry his legacy as well. But I think it's cool that Leo, his influence was so great that we had Ultraman Zero and Ultraman Regulus, two different ends of his character. I think that's really cool. One has a more direct connection to Ultraman Leo's past before that great alien magma invasion, and the other represents Leo's bond of 7 during the course of his own show. I think that's really neat. And next, I do want to bring up the two kind of elephants in the room, so to speak, of when I'm talking about Legacy Ultras, that being 2021's Ultraman Trigger and 2022's Ultraman Decker. Now, I'll be up front, I do have a bit of a soft spot for Decker. It was the first video on my channel that actually went pretty big, and that was like one of the oldest things I've ever done. But it gave me hope for wanting to talk about the things I like on YouTube, so take that as you will. Even years later, I do think that Ultraman Trigger and Ultraman Decker, while it's clear that compared to the other Legacy guys I've talked about in this video, they really had a big legacy to live up to. But considering that they were completely homaging the big guys in the room, Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna. But how do they stand up years later? Well, I gotta say, I do think that Ultraman Decker was the stronger of the two shows when compared to Trigger, but Trigger definitely had a bunch of highlights in his own show as well. I mean, the fights across both of these shows are fantastic, and I really love the way they incorporated CGI to even higher level than I saw with Ultraman Z and some of the other shows at the time. And when going into these shows for older fans, yeah, it may be very hard for the likes of Kengo and Asumi respectively to live up to the legends that were Daigo and Asuka. But I still think they did a really good job, and while they have some brief similarities with their legacy host, they're still distinct enough in their own way. Sure, Kengo has the smile thing, but he's still optimistic, and the way his story ends up is different from Tiga's, which is a good thing, even if there were some pretty on-the-nose similarities throughout his series. And with Decker and Asumi, I really like them. And the fact that they are, in a way, they have a very stronger connection to Dyna than Trigger had to Tiga. So much so that Dyna pretty much just straight up created Decker as we see throughout the series. Like, in that revelation, that was insane. In a way, yeah, Decker really is Dyna's son, just when it comes to Ultra themselves. And I know that may be a bit interesting to talk about since there's the ideas that Shinasuke's father is actually Dyna, but I do think it's cool that throughout the adventures of Asuka and Dyna, throughout the multiverse and the cosmos, they would need some backup of their own in fighting the overwhelming threat that was the spears on Earths that didn't have an Ultraman. So I think it made sense that throughout the multiverse, and Dyna's maybe studied some new techniques, he was just able to create Decker and another Ultra called Dynas. And this really isn't something that we've seen before from what I can remember, an Ultra just given the power of creating another Ultra on the spot. And I do think I need to revisit that Ultraman Decker film, but I gotta say, this is unique, and it has that kind of unique bit of surreal feeling that I think works with Ultraman as a whole, but definitely when you go back to the Tiga and Dyna universe with the Neo Frontier. And as it stands, the other parallel Neo Frontier we got of Trigger and Decker may look like it doesn't really hold a candle, but that's just because of the sheer difference in time and the fact that shows back then usually had a bigger scale thanks to being around 50 episodes. But I don't think that distracts from the strengths that Trigger and Decker still provide. Like I said, the fights are great, they're still creative, there's some really strong character work in both shows, even though Trigger might be, you have to wait a little longer in that show to get to the really good emotional beats. And as it stands, I do think that Trigger and Decker, their own strengths, the way they play with CGI, how beautiful the suits look, and the fact that, I mean, come on, you get to go back to Tiga and Dyna. Sure, we may not get the human host to actually meet each other from Tiga Dyna to Trigger Decker. However, the way that they're able to bring back the aesthetic, the music, and, come on, the monsters and aliens, guys. How often do you get to see monsters from the Tiga and Dyna's Neo Frontier actually reappear, huh? I gotta say, the fact that when Tiga and Dyna reappear in these new shows, the fact that they also get to help their new counterpart fight an old foe, whether it's Creloid or Dyna and Decker fighting against Geomos, I just really love it when they bring up the old guys, they bring them back, and they get to fight a respective old foe that we haven't seen in decades. And yeah, I do think that Decker maybe did a better job at incorporating Dyna characters like Alien Gregor, the Spears, and Spearsaurus, among other characters, while I think that Trigger should have had a few more Tiga monsters and aliens. Although, I guess Trigger was really focused on having the 3 dark giants in new form, but I digress. So yeah, I do think that compared to the legacies, Trigger and Decker really had a lot going against them, but I do think they're still both enjoyable shows with great music, fights, and some really nice character work once you dive into those respective shows. And of course, the fan service to Tiga and Dyna fans is still wonderful. I just do wish you had a Gaia just to finish the trilogy, but I understand why. So, with all that in mind, and in conclusion, I've talked about the legacy of these new Ultras that, in a way, took up the mantle of their past predecessors while still doing their own thing and carving out new fans to enjoy them. Whether that was Ultraman Zero, Mebius, Ultraman Geed, Taiga, Zet, Trigger, Decker, Regulus, and even going back and talking about the likes of Neos, Powered, and Great for a little bit. All these in mind, it's really interesting to think about these guys and the way they influence other tokusatsu heroes while still really just celebrating why we love tokusatsu. Amazing special effects that bring these characters to life in very humane ways, fighting against the bad guys, great fights, music, cinematography, the heart, the emotion. I just think that Legacy Ultras are an interesting topic in this franchise, and one that I really wanted to talk about. Because you would think there would be a lot going against them when living up to their older respective heroes, but living in the shadow and growing out of it is a feat in of its own. And I think that all these Legacy Ultras, well, whenever they pop up, I'll be happy to see them for sure. Just as I would be happy to see the old guys return as well. So, I've been Tiger Drop Films. Thank you so much for watching. What are some of your favorite Legacy Ultras? What are your thoughts on them? Let me know in the comments. And feel free to check out my whole playlist of Ultraman video essays. They're waiting for you. Until next time, stay tuned and I'll see ya across the multiverse of Ultraman. Imitation. It could be everywhere, at every corner you turn and at any place you look. Imitation is especially everywhere in the current digital world we live in, with the rampant use of artificial intelligence being as annoying as ever. Man, I swear I can't get on anything without some pop-up for AI hassling me. With this in mind, it reminded me of a certain trope that the Ultraman series tends to bring up, that being the classic battle of an Ultraman against an imitation Ultraman. Now sure, I may just be a lowly wanderer going through the stars with the enthusiasm to talk about the franchises I love that give me passion by using footage to highlight my points here on YouTube, but I only make videos when I have ideas I just have to share, such as today's video. It can be terrifying, not knowing when someone's gonna use your likeness to do dastardly things. And if the way technology is going, it certainly feels like many of the alien Seijin foes that Ultraman battles can pop up at any moment and at any time. That's why I'm making this video, since I believe we can find some sort of solution on how to battle imitation, and that means by staying true to yourself. Just look at how the mini battles against copycats end up. More often than not, it is because Ultraman's altruism and sense of justice prevails over all the fake Ultras he battles. So sit back, relax, and join me as I do an analysis over the many different interpretations of the concept of Imitation Ultras throughout the Ultraman series. The first appearance of this concept was in the original Ultraman series. In episode 18, we get introduced to the alien Zerub, who proposes that humanity is the so-called little brother to his race and only exists to be mind-controlled by him through hypnosis. Now, Zerub's fascinating, as he knew that both Ultraman and the SSSP were in his way, thus he devised schemes in order to fool them. Now, said schemes boiled down to commandeering one of mankind's rockets from Saturn, raining radioactive fog onto Tokyo, creating a communication device out of a radio, wish I could do that, and lastly, he kidnapped Shin Hayata. It's especially interesting as Zerub was one of the earliest Seijin foes in the franchise, and not only that, but he arrived on Earth with the knowledge that Hayata was Ultraman's host. Throughout the Ultraman mythos, you'll notice how a bunch of these aliens arrive knowing that the protagonist is Ultraman, which makes it more enthralling as we don't know what they're going to do with that information. This Zerub fella may not have the visually satisfying powers as Baltan or the sheer weirdness of Dada, but what he does have in his favor is deluding others. Sure, many of Ultraman's alien foes usually cause bizarre circumstances to happen in everyday life, yet Zerub leaves a mark as he was the first one to create a vile fake Ultraman. If you just look at his design, you know something's off about this other Ultraman. And he even has those evil looking eyes, which I think is a nice touch. Things play out in the original 66 series pretty much the same as seen in 2022's Shin Ultraman. And both of these instances, Zerub impersonates Ultraman prior to the climactic battle, and tries to tarnish his image by causing destruction. Likewise, the actual fight occurs during a city at nightfall, as Ultraman saves one of his friends from the clutches of the Imitator, and then a quick, snappy, and answer-clearing duel carries on. It becomes clear to everyone watching who the real Ultraman is as Zerub reveals himself, and then the Giant of Light is able to finish him off. I especially like how the original episode ends with the cast exclaiming how the real Ultraman would never hurt humanity, as the closing shot is our Ultraman himself as he flies towards the camera. It's super sweet, and it's just a great way to close the episode on Ultraman himself. It ties into how people will eventually realize who the real Ultraman was all along. That same guy we all know will save the day, even against maddening doppelgangers. And speaking of doppelgangers, if you ever seen C-Lab 2021, then you know that you gotta deal with doppelgangers head on. One subtle detail I like about this Zerub episode, this plot, was how it's implied that Hoshino knew Hayata was Ultraman, hence why he brought him the beta capsule. The idea of kids knowing who the real Ultraman is ties into the next entry on the list. Let's fast forward a little bit to the 1990s, where in episode 31 of Ultraman Dyna we got a new interpretation of the imitation concept. This time things are not as maleficent, and instead boil down to a battle between martial arts and the pride of fighters. Alien Gregor arrives on Earth with the goal to become the strongest in the galaxy by besting Dyna in a one-on-one match and a sparring ring, even if it means he has to keep taunting Dyna to finally get his fight. Before that, however, we get a goofy, charming scene where Shinosuke is just enjoying some kind of sandwich and drink during his patrol. I don't even think he was on his lunch break, I think he was just hungry. We zoom out into the perspective of a camera as a kid named Kudo Natsumi takes pictures of Mr. Chuckles over here on lunch break. It turns out that while Natsumi is wanting to be a photographer when she grows up, and bugs Asuka for a while, until the kaiju Mons Agar seemingly returns and creates havoc. Now, I'm a pretty big Mons Agar fan myself, so shout out to him. I like this moment where Asuka looks over his shoulder once again before trying the Henshin and the Dyna. Makes his encounter with Natsumi moments ago even funnier, especially since he was taking pictures. Who knows if she could have taken a picture of him becoming Dyna. Ties in the whole theme of trying to keep your identity safe. Before he can activate the live flasher, however, somehow another Dyna appears and takes care of Mons Agar, although he fights far differently than the Dyna we know.
This other guy fights with too much pride and unnecessary style, does a lot of showboating, and does a horrific finisher on the monster, which Natsumi remarks about as she takes pictures. So her little encounter with Asuka earlier pays off as she becomes another witness and helps encourage Asuka to keep fighting. Here we get another example of a kid showing and knowing something is amiss even when adults don't, and it pays off later. I just like that Natsumi helps Asuka and therefore Dinah realize the importance of continuing the fight against all odds. It shows that all the earlier episodes of Dinah's actions as heroism has paid off on everyday people. I love it. Additionally, the real Dinah knows the value of relying on others, which serves as additional strength that can help him when he needs it most, as we see later on in the climactic fight between Dinah and his imitator. It's an episode that seems to fly by since the final fight begins around the halfway point. The beauty of tokusatsu is this: the fights we see may be special effects, yet fights are a fantastically engaging way to enjoy, well, fantasy storytelling. It's the same thing that happens in martial arts films. The fights are important for the story. I love that tokusatsu allows suit actors to emote in ways that are creative and universal, while at the same time being something that is actually in front of us. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's that storytellers should never discredit the distinct storytelling ability that fights bring. Just look at Gennady Tarkovsky's work. The same idea applies to tokusatsu. And when it comes to our titular Ultramen battling their devious doppelgangers, the cadence of the fights helps sell the story. We see that alien Gregor's imitation is boastful and doesn't have any problems with relaying a relentless beatdown on his foes, as we saw with Bonzigar earlier. It's also that Gregor has no problem attacking humans that were cheering on the real Dinah. He really doesn't have a code. Compare that to the real Dinah who has to earn his victories and would never stoop down to something so low. With this in mind, this particular idea pays off in the ending where Gregor begins to see that Dinah's true strength was not merely his own, for it was the strength of everyone that believed in him that gave him the power to keep going. And Gregor wasn't the only one that learned something, as Dinah and Asuka were able to prevail and reconsider their own determination. Asuka is one of my favorite Ultra hosts. I love how his series shows him learning to overcome his own uneasy feelings that lie beneath his goofy, lighthearted nature. Even if a foe is more overpowering and confident in their abilities, you can still unlock that passionate determination you know you have deep down. That signature Dinah fighting spirit. A similar event happens in Dinah's movie that occurs during his series. I really like the duel with Gregor because it ends up without a casualty. That paired with the classic Battle at Sunset backdrop makes this fight one I'd love to revisit. And I'm also a fan of Gregor's episode and character in 2022's Ultraman Decker. Whenever Decker revisited ideas and old faces from Dinah, it usually paid off greatly. And it was especially fun there since Gregor's human form was played by Koji Nakamura, who was a major and prominent suit actor during the Tiga Dinah Gaia trilogy. Cool homages like that always bring a smile to an old pirate like myself. While the Gregor we see here never imitated Decker, I actually like that the episode instead gave the spotlight to the alien himself. Shows that the concept of alien Gregor and the thrill of a worthy battle can extend beyond imitation. The imitation design for Dinah, let's go back to Dinah, is incredible. His primary design is an evil-fied Miracle Type 1, with sharp black lines combined with the gold and Miracle Blue. It makes a solid contrast to the Dinah we know. Plus, the imitation has those evil elf shoes like Zerub's fake Ultra form. It's a nice touch. And speaking of uniquely contrasting bad guy designs and possible redemption, let's talk about Evil Tiga. Before Ultraman Dinah, there was Ultraman Tiga, and I'm sure you've heard about him. He's a pretty popular guy. I wanted to talk about Tiga after Dinah though, on purpose, because I feel like this version of the concept seems to still pop up more often in this franchise. By that I mean the idea of a fully sentient evil Ultra copy that isn't an alien. Rather, sometimes this is the case of a human being the antagonist and summoning their own dark counterpart. I've seen in Ultraman Tiga, where CEO and physicist named Kaigo Masaki stole Daigo's spark lance, and became Evil Tiga. This story takes place in a two-parter across episodes 43 and 44. This Masaki guy had a superiority complex and believed he was destined to rise above other humans, going as far as believing he was a messiah of sorts. Well, the kind of messiah that only seeks to control others with his own lust for power. He partnered with TBC scientist Yuji Tango and used data on Daigo's inheritance of light to develop his plan to become his own Giant of Light. Episode 43 is about Geoshark and developing Masaki's supervillain scheme, where he steals a spark lance from an exhausted Daigo at a carnival. He even would later boast about how him and Daigo share similar DNA. It's interesting that around this time in Tiga we get to see more of Daigo, having to contend with antagonistic humans, such as earlier in episode 39 with Akio Kurino. Now the storyline of Masaki is fascinating since it gives us an insight into how the concept of Ultraman is perceived by others, and that can always vary. There's a little bit about how that scientist guy, Tango, betrayed the TPC and stole a statue remains, that dust, because he felt underutilized and neglected for his quote-unquote superior intelligence. Therefore, he partnered with Masaki. Having these two guys being power-hungry because they believe Ultraman only represents power shows how the beautiful simplicity of Ultraman, being the kind stranger who steps in to help others, can be misconstrued by people who think they're smarter than they are. It could be a terrifying thought since our real world is full of people in charge who think they're smarter than they are. And that hubris can lead to sad consequences for everyone else, such as the scene where Masaki corrupts the giant into Evil Tiga and starts destroying the city. It's madness. It's upsetting to see a twisted Ultra figure begin attacking a city. And this already sets him up as a more antagonistic threat like Zerub more than a Gregor. Notably, Evil Tiga's design has what I'd call a icky or vile color scheme, rather than just being, say, an evil Ultra with red eyes and a black and silver color scheme. Instead, he's got these sorta cyan and sorta light blue eyes that they really capture your eyes, your attention, and a reddish-orange chest piece and limb braces outlined by a hazy gold. Then he's got the black outlines filling out other parts of the classic silver body, making his color scheme very distinct while still being recognizable as a wicked inverse of the Tiga we know. And then, Evil Tiga's body language matches up with what we saw with Masaki in the previous episode at the carnival, but now heightened and exaggerated. He fights guts and tragically slays his loyal buddy Guardy. Oh man, it's a hard scene to watch unfold as Guardy desperately tries to get through to his old buddy, but it just doesn't end well. We don't often see a villainous human corrupt an Ultra, and it makes you wonder what Evil Tiga may have looked like in the past. Luckily, the real Tiga is able to confront and defeat his evil imitator, while also laying Guardy's body to rest. Although, it looks like Guardy may have lived, since his dog host runs past the camera during the end montage. Good boy. As for Masaki himself, he returns in the finale to help Guts revive Tiga and Daigo. It's nice. The fact that he gets some kind of redemption shows how the series has evolved with their antagonists. It also ties into one of Tiga's core themes of being able to find the light and get another chance, even if it seems like an overwhelming mountain to climb. I mentioned the episode earlier about Akio Kurino, and the same theme applies here. Plus, we see a similar sentiment in episode 45, with the gigantic dream pollen flower monster, Gaijira. Both of these episodes end with a human or alien antagonist coming to the revelation that Ultraman means more than they had additionally understood. While the exact endings and fates differ for these opposing guys, I always find it heartwarming when characters can genuinely discover something they never saw before. And when you have the evil Tiga story between these other stories I mentioned, they all come together into a nice, cohesive theme about the importance of Ultraman Tiga himself, and Daigo's own determination to make the right decision of being the friend that humanity needs. So I've talked about Zerub, Gregor, and Misaki's evil Tiga, and how they all manifest different interpretations of the Imitation Ultra concept. It's refreshing and makes the concept ripe for new takes. Evil Tiga set the stage for a new version of a bad guy Ultra, and funny enough, he wouldn't be the only one for Tiga, as there was Chimera and Tiga's own dark forms. The Ultraman series as a whole would revisit Tiga's dark designs and create dark forms for several Ultras in the future, especially in the 3rd generation. Heck, even further, to this day, in the 4th generation, we're getting the new Ultraman Arc film where he fights a dark Arc counterpart. It's kind of funny since just a few years ago we got a film with Ultraman Trigger's film where he fights Evil Trigger, so Evil Tiga kind of lived on in that way. However, that's a story for another time. As for the purpose of this video, I just want to talk about a different kind of Imitation Ultra next, that being robots. Robots. These guys are built different, quite literally. Sometimes just want to see Ultraman fight robots, and there's been a bunch of imitators being robots before. The first was when Ultra 7 fought a robot counterpart, in episode 46 where he was created by Alien Salome. Then, in Ultraman Ace's show, we got a robot Ace in episode 14. This robot Ace was created by the ever hater of peace that is Yapul, as a testing subject for their far superior Ace Killer. Perhaps Ace Killer himself could be considered an Imitation Ultra. I'll have to ponder that idea more. Anyway, there was a Terranoid in Ultraman Dyna that got corrupted by the spears and once again showed how some humans are power hungry for Ultraman's power, but not his heart. With this Terranoid from Dyna in mind, there's another example of a robot Ultra trying to impersonate the real thing. That's the first part of Ultraman Z's final boss, where Ultroid Zero was made to be the ultimate weapon, but was also corrupted into a new super monster. For all the multiverses there are, it seems that some greedy humans just can't get it through their skulls. Luckily, these robotic Ultras show that you just can't beat the real guy. It's another way of showing how different these impersonating Ultras can be, but ultimately fall short of the real Ultras we know and love. And in the age of weird technology that's coming about, I certainly hope I do not have to fight a robotic doppelganger of myself. But if I do, there's plenty of Ultramen that give me ideas on how to come out on top. SHUWATCH! There were other robotic Ultras I could have mentioned, and other types of impersonating aliens seen throughout the many corners of this franchise. For instance, Alien Barbaru from Ultraman Leo is another dastardly invader that impersonated as a fake Astra. Then if you look at Ultraman Nexus, most of his major villains are dark counterparts, so perhaps it could still extend there. But I think that ties more into a different type of villain, said type of villain being the big guy in the room named Ultraman Belial, who certainly made a name for himself as a distinct character. No matter what though, whether it's an imitation or evil counterpart, these villains are no match for the real Ultra heroes when the time comes to see who is real. And if by some chance this happens to you, make sure you handle it like any Ultraman would. Would you look at that, my color timer's going off. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Tiger Drop Films. Feel free to let me know what characters I didn't mention in the comments below and why you like them. Until next time, remember to enjoy the small things in life, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Oh man, please. Oh, please, Pigmon. Please. Please, Pigmon. Please, I don't trust Kanagon, but I trust you. Give me $500 billion. Come on, I trust you, Pigmon. I don't trust Kanagon, I only trust you and my imagination. Yes, I'm learning just like Arc did to use my imagination. I just need $500 million. Come on, can a YouTuber catch a break? Imagination. Today at Tiger Drop Films, you probably guessed it, I'm going to talk about Ultraman Arc. Now, last time that I gave Ultraman Arc the big spotlight on my channel was last year with my The Art of Ultraman Fights Ultraman Arc video, but today I wanted to go into the whole series now, because when I made that last Ultraman Arc video, only episode 1 released. In this video I'm going to talk about way more episodes. I'm definitely going to at least talk about 1 to 16, and some of the ones after that, and have a special guest on this episode, just you wait. So now, without further ado, let's get into the Imagination of Ultraman Arc. One of my favorite things about Ultraman Arc is how, once again, the amazing teams at SUPRO Productions are able to revitalize and re-energize the Ultraman concept. And by that, I mean they breathe new life into it while doing something new and staying true to what makes Ultraman Ultraman. Now, what I just said, that still applies to many other Ultraman shows, such as Ultraman Blazar and many others. I'm just saying that again because I think Arc continues a trend of Ultraman being the series that's able to evolve while finding new themes that make sense for the franchise, such as imagination. Themes of imagination permeate throughout all of Ultraman Arc from every character. Not just our protagonist Yuma himself, but also characters such as Ren, Captain Bon, and Mr. Ishido, and even Yuppie. And I love that Arc is able to give so many of these supporting characters of Skip their own episodes of shine while dealing with their own themes of imagination. For instance, with Ren and the Captain, they both have episodes with their old mentors, or somebody they looked up to. While the outcomes of each of those episodes is different, I like that it ties into their own themes of their own, well, upbringing and what they saw in these mentors and their own imaginations, you know, because imagination can be more than just our typical idea of it in a creative sense. It can also be how you remember someone, what you think they are of you, and what you thought of them, and so many things about your own bond with them. It can be many things. And in addition to that, we have Mr. Ishido, who has an episode that shows that sometimes our imagination can get the worst of us. Such as the episode at the hotel in the mountains, that little inn, the Mushroom Inn I think is what it's called, where Mr. Ishido, or Shu, he lets the worst parts of his imagination get the best of him, and he thinks that the alien in that episode, the alien Seijin, was, well, an evil alien invader, but it turns out he wasn't. Stuff like that with all these supporting characters is great. And Yuppie, if you just look at him, he's just a happy guy. He's a good example of a good kind of AI, just a little buddy, you know. And his little head pops up, he's like a little dog face. Yuppie's a cool little character. But, you know, does he beat Sevenger for me? No, it's hard to beat Sevenger. Anyway, then you have Yuma himself. The big whole thing, what imagination's all about in the show. And I love that his dynamic of Arc himself is such a brilliant way to give life to the idea of Ultraman as host. And as we've learned that Arc once saved Yuma as a kid, even though he feels guilt-tripping that he couldn't save Yuma's parents, he bonded with Yuma that day in Hoshimoto City. And I love the idea that we get in episode 16, where we learn that the reason Arc looks like the Ultraman we know, or, you know, just that silver and red color scheme at least, is because of Yuma's imagination as a kid. Isn't that great? A kid filled in the gaps on what Arc is all about, or what Ultraman looks like. I think that's brilliant. Because you look at the inception of Ultraman from the beginning, he was another masterpiece created by Eiji Tsupraya, and later on to be adapted by Tsupraya's own sons in the Showa era. So this idea of kids, or even if you're an adult, still having that imagination, that good, genuine imagination, is amazing. And I
love that in that same episode 16 it pays off because Arc himself uses his own imagination. We get Ultraman himself gets the spotlight. He uses his imagination to unlock his new galaxy armor. It's brilliant. Like, I'm serious. Like, I think that episode 116 reminded me a bit of how Ace would do it, where you have this main arc about some antagonists in the plot or something, and then it kind of shifts gears a little bit in the middle of the show. But in the context of Arc, the way he fights off Alien Swede and that Zeton monster is incredible. And I think that episode 16 really solidified Arc as a new favorite of mine. There's a great payoff. Throughout the show, we saw how Yuma and his own childhood drawings would come to life with Arc himself, and his flashbacks of his family. It's emotional, and the way that Arc tells Yuma that his imagination is what brought him back to life is just ethereal. It's phenomenal. It's a concept that works so well with Ultraman, and I can't believe that it took us this long to get a whole show just about imagination. Not that it hasn't happened before, but I think the concept, the way it was used here, was so fresh, and it makes Arc a nice companion piece to blaze on. And I love it when Ultraman shows have a new series that is able to just stand on its own, and it just looks great next to the previous shows. You know what I mean? And I could go on and on about Arc, and would you look at that? I'm getting a transmission. It's my good pal Brendan.
Hello? Hello? Testing. I think I got in. Hello there, folks. This is Brendan. You may have heard of me from G-Force, the Kaiju podcast, where I also speak with our lovely host Ike here. My work editing and writing for Total Kingdom's Kaiju War Chronicles, and some little things around the internet. I'm here because after getting the transmission from Ike, I need to send in my own transmission so that I can give my thoughts on Ultraman Arc. As someone who regarded Blazar as possibly the peak of the next-gen era, I won't lie and say I was kind of worried how Arc was going to compare. While I was charmed by its very classic show feel from the teasers, and I love the switch to a scientific defense team again, and of course, new kaiju suits are always a plus. The armor gimmick seemed a bit weak to me, and I was worried despite its promise of imagination, this would be a status quo return for Tsuburaya and Ultraman. And I honestly felt more obligated when I decided to check out the premiere. That will be honest and say I was kind of caught in the hype from the stellar Ultraman Rising that made me want to check out as much Ultraman content as possible. Well, I've been this proud to eat my words since high school because Arc is phenomenal. The biggest thing I love about this show is the much more narrow focus it has on the typical formula. We're focusing on one city, its local defense force, and the one Ultraman who's devoted to defending it. It's a welcome change, and to me, honestly gives me the vibes of a Ghibli film at times. It makes the world feel a bit more real, which helps the science fantasy of Ultraman hit harder. This especially applies to the characters. I feel they may not be as fleshed out as some of the other defense teams. All Skip are really good characters. Rin feels down to earth in comparison to the bigger personalities in a way I like very much, especially with her episodes Goodbye Ren and the Wishing Bird, showing a secret hope that makes her feel fleshed out. The Chief is awkward but kind in the same kind of way we've seen in the past, which I always appreciate, and I think his character feeling reserved and as if he's messed up dealing with kaiju as a life decision is a very nice little character, arc. Shu is a wonderful character. I really enjoy watching him. He seems unknowable at first, but the more we see of him, the more we see he has a secret golden heart, and it makes him a very interesting take on the agent from the government trope we see so many times in kaiju media. And of course, Yuppie isn't the best mecha in an Ultra show. Please, Tsuburaya, if you're watching this, bring back my son Sevenger, please. I miss him so much. Where is he gone? But he's a fun comic relief. And Yuma, well, more on that later. Moving on to kaiju, I love the aesthetic Arc provides. Ever since Orb, I feel Tsuburaya just locked into the perfect mix of classic show sensibilities and genuine, beautiful craftsmanship for their kaiju. I love all of Arc's new rogues like Shadong, Lyoto, Livijira, the various Gelos, and especially the Dime. I, for one, welcome our new Cube next-gen Zeton. But yeah, they're the perfect mix of inventive new roles and new designs for kaiju. I'm still not over the Gomez episode, and that Kanagon episode is just straight up hilarious. And of course, these returning kaijus have some truly beautiful episodes. It was a thrill to see King of Mons again. I'll keep this short by not gushing as much as I can about how much I love the Blazar crossover. Zangil, my beloved, rest in peace to a real one. Not to mention, this show has some truly insane and imaginative fight choreography. The armors truly make some fun takes on how the fight can go, whether it's a straight-up brawl with a solar one, a speedy clash with the lunar, and then just the absolute mind-bending awesomeness of the galaxy one. Seriously, Subaru, if there's anything we can take from Vet's Gamma Future form and the galaxy armor, it's that you need to start doing really weird shit with Ultraman again. It goes so hard. Even when they don't show up, though, seeing Arc come up with new ideas mid-fight to win is always amazing. I still love that moment with the shield being used as a WWE table. Finally, the thing I love the most about this show and its Ultra pair is the theme. No, not just imagination, but the theme of hope at Arc's core. Yuma is a man who struggled with his entire world changing in an instant, and now thrust into the role of protecting this same world from the same threats for hundreds of others. And yet, despite these heavy stakes, we never see Yuma hesitate. In fact, I feel this has been the first time in a while that the Ultra host has been judged so much for rushing to fight kaiju no hesitation. And I think that tenacity of Yuma can be attributed to the hope that pushes his character, and really the whole show. Arc imagines a world where even if things aren't always perfect, we have to hope for the better. That despite the odds being stacked, there's a better world if we only imagine it. That as lonely as we are, there's a friend out there in the stars for us. That despite the pain we suffered, we need to believe in others and accept the good and the bad. That even if we lost the things that made us, they've helped us become better people for the world that we have ended up in. Even if all the odds are stacked against us, we can't stand by and let it happen. It's time to run and face the future and fight to make it better. I can't think of anything more Ultraman than that. Shit, I think I know your guys' transmission. I'm gonna have to go. Ike, finish it up, buddy.
Oh man, that was groovy, Brendan. Well said, my man. That was Brendan from our podcast, G-Force, a kaiju podcast for all things tokusatsu and more of kaiju. And Brendan, my man, thank you so much for being on here. You hit the nail on the head. And I love your final statement about Arc and the hope of humanity, that indomitable human spirit that is Ultraman. Well said, my friend. Well said. And with that in mind, with Brendan, what he said, and what I've talked about earlier about Arc and the different ways imagination permeates throughout each character, and the overall aesthetic of the show, I just think that when it comes to phenomenal fights, the awesome aesthetic, the music, the way that Arc himself feels so old school but new, I think that Ultraman Arc is a testament to what new life in a franchise can really mean. And Ultraman, quite frankly, has been hitting out of the park year after year. And I see a bunch of golden roads ahead for SUPRO Productions and Ultraman. Just this last year we had Ultraman Rising, and before that Shin Ultraman. And a bunch of stage shows and other short films. We even had a little mini-series about Ultraman Regulus, which I have a video on that too. I thought was a bit of a new gen Ultraman Leo, so to speak. Things like that. There's so much going on in the franchise. And I love that we can all have a main Ultraman show to jump back into. And I think Arc really is amazing. It's astonishing. It fits the mold that Ultraman is. And I can't wait to see how the series wraps up with its new film coming out, the Ultraman Arc film. I mean, really, Subaraya, what a way to keep evolving Ultraman. You're killing it. Amazing fights, music, themes, and characters. This is what Ultraman's all about. This is what Tokusatsu is all about. And if you haven't checked out Ultraman Arc yet, then you better. There's plenty of great monsters, aliens, and themes. And like that episode where we had the guy who lived in his apartment and he made a friend of another alien planet. That episode was tear-jerking. I mentioned the episode earlier about Mr. Shu and the alien at the Mushroom Inn. Episode Ren and her mentor. And just everything about the show is amazing. It gives the humans the spotlight. It gives the kaiju and the aliens the spotlight. It gives humanity a chance. And surprisingly of all, allows Ultraman to really develop himself. I'm telling you, Ultraman Arc is a new favorite of mine. Plethora of incredible episodes. You better check it out. And thank you so much for watching. I've been Tiger Drop Films. Let's start off the new year strong with Ultraman, and I've got plenty of other videos over other things I like coming out soon. So, thank you for watching. Be sure to check out G-Force and Kaiju podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. SHUWATCH.